Good morning, sir.
Morning. How are we?
Doing well, doing well. Looks like we're both in a different environment again. Uh,
Yes.
Michael, I think we've seen that background of yours a couple times.
It is another Marriott. They all kind of look alike.
Well, and I'm in a hotel. I had to change my view because my original view had the ocean and the beach behind me, and I didn't want to make people really jealous this morning. But it's great to be here. I am also a little sad because we're going to take a break for the month of July. But we'll come back in August. I'm ready to do it, but giving us the month of July off. But with that, I want to just talk about a couple things, Michael, and then I'll have you share about why we do experience. One of the cool things that will happen in July while we're off, though, is we're doing a special summer edition with Zach Hamilton, who we had here on the show on the Combustion Chronicles, and it's 10 to 15 minute episodes for the podcast, and talking about experience management and experience management systems and voice of the consumer and all kinds of things experience. And what's fun with it is, Michael, you actually interviewed Zach and I for that, and it was so much fun when we did it for the day. So that will be coming out in place of Experience Friday Live. We'll be launching that on all podcast platforms. So if you're interested in that, keep a lookout for that as well. And our resources at Mophie, go to our resources page. You can find all kinds of resources. But Michael, tell everyone why we've been doing this show. I think I looked today, we are 24 episodes in. And so why we've been doing this show and why we have such amazing guests like today's guest.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think we could come up with a different reason every single week because, there's a basic reason and there's so many things that come up with that. And today, for me, it's all about competition. Having done the work that I'm doing this week, companies are always looking at a way to get ahead, and companies are led by humans, and humans are often competitive and want to get ahead. Well, a competitive edge is experience and understanding not just the experience economy, but that employee experience and customer experience and all the things that factor into all those into an experience ecosystem that will give your company a competitive edge. That's all there is to it. And there is a business model that says you do not have to spend gazillions of dollars to make that happen. You can actually increase your revenue, decrease your expenses based on better experiences. So all that to say, it's a no-brainer. Just lean into experience.
I love that. It's a no-brainer. Just lean into it. That's like a mic drop nugget moment, Michael.
Yeah, get over it.
That's right. I love it. I almost was late for this show because I was actually on a call with the CEO we were having that conversation. He's like, I just don't understand why every CEO doesn't understand that this is a competitive advantage when we should invest in it. Well, we were really fortunate, Michael, to meet our guest here at the CX Forum in Boston. And, we hear a lot of speakers talk about a lot of things. And one of the things that I hate talking about the most, as you know, Michael, is data. And that it makes me cringe. And particularly because we work in the healthcare industry a lot. But all other industries have all this data and I won't say no one, but we don't know what to do with it. Healthcare still struggles on what to do with it. But Chantel got up and spoke about it in such, I don't have any other words to say, but in such a beautiful way. There were there are very few moments, as you know, Michael, where I'll set everything down and just listen. And this was one of those moments when she started to talk about it, and I'm like, we have to have her on our show. And because of even in the space she works in. So let me just give you a brief intro on Chantel Wilson Chase is the Associate Director of Quality Analytics, Insights, and Experience at Alexion, which is pharmaceutical. And she shares that data listening is a paradigm shift. So listen to that, you guys. Data listening is a paradigm shift as we think about our data. Listening involves viewing our CX and our EX, or member and patient data, in creative ways. And so I am so excited to bring her to the stage with us. Chantel, it's great to see you.
Shawn, it's nice to see you again.
And it is I can't be more transparent than to say I hate data conversations.
I know.
And I hate it many times. But when you talked about this whole concept, it blew me away. It literally blew me away. And I said to Michael, we've got to get to know her more. We got to understand this because she's helping me see something that I've struggled with for a lot of years. But before we even jump into all of that, we asked everyone right up front the same question. And that is, why do you do what you do? And what keeps you motivated as you do it? Tell us.
Oh, and I love that. So one thing I need to just do to get the housekeeping thing out of the way is I need to let everyone know that my opinions, the opinions I express today, are mine exclusively and do not represent any employer past or present. So let me just get that housekeeping piece out of the way.
I love it.
Thank you. But why I do what I do, and thank you for the introduction, Shawn, because I love data, and I know data is rather it's not everyone loves it and not everyone can relate to it, but we can relate to it. We just haven't spoken the language. And it's through that data listening that I want to talk to you. But why I do what I do is I have a strong passion and love for people. While I am an introvert, believe it or not, I care about people. I want to serve people. If I can make something better for you, why would I not do it? We don't need to be scientists to know that we put a ripple in the world when we drop a pebble into the ocean. So if I can make it better for you, you can make it better for someone else, and they can make it better. So experience, data, and understanding and listening to that data is why I do what I do. It's to serve people, honestly.
Now like you've got another nugget now in my book, Chantel,
That's sweet.
because I think I know I don't have to say I think I know that that's why Michael and I do what we do.
Right.
It's to serve people and make people better, and it's why we're passionate about healthcare, and all of that. So
Agree.
um, you gave us this quote, and then I'm going to let Michael take over and ask some questions of you. I love this quote. I've always loved this quote. Um, Take care of your employees, and they will take care of your customers. Richard Branson simply put it that way. You've heard me say it on the stage, Chantel. Like, if you take care of your employees, the numbers will come.
Right.
Like you don't have to focus on that. So, Michael, take us down this because I really want to talk about this concept with Chantel today.
Yeah, and I think it's a great quote to start us off because I think a lot of us, when we read it, we think about let's take care of our employees. So that means we're going to have a pizza party on Friday, and we're going to offer an incentive drawing. We're going to have Employee Appreciation Week where we have a lunch each day, and we're going to give them swag bags. That's what taking care of employees means, right? But there's no data around it. There's no information around other than that makes us feel good. So I would love for your perspective on this of what does it mean to take care of employees from your lens?
Right. It isn't the pizza party, in my opinion. It isn't. It is giving people purposeful, meaningful work. It's valuing their opinions. It's honoring and respecting each other, giving each other a wonderful work environment with purposeful work is what a great experience looks like. We care for people's basic needs, of course. So when we look at Maslow's pyramid, of course we're taking care of some of the basic needs, but we go up higher than that. And I firmly believe when we take care of our employees, they, like the ripple I talked about earlier, take care of their employees, take care of their employees, and ultimately we get to that end user, our customer, our patient, our member. Um, so it's not the pizza party, it's the purposeful work and it's the respect we give each other day in, day out.
But come on now, Chantel. Those employee engagement surveys tell us everything we want to know in a company.
Are you egging me on, Shawn?
Might be, but I'll let Michael take over because I can egg a lot here on this one.
Well, we've heard you talk about data listening. So where does data listening intersect with what we're talking about in terms of all aspects of experience?
Yeah. So data listening is an approach that I use to better understand and pull more meaning out of data. So, for example, yes, in our discipline, in experience management discipline, in customer experience, it's a new discipline. It's 20, 25 years old. And of course, we sort of were founded more on those surveys, were cornerstones, were foundational. So we can't just discard them. But like with anything, we move and we advance and we get greater understanding. When we know better, we do better. When we know better, we do better. So with that in mind, the approach that I take, data listening approach that I take, is I of course use experience data. So that would be the surveys, um, that would be focus groups, asking our subject matter experts, and getting that primary data collection. So um, and that's all going to be sort of thematically coded. It's generally qualitative, and it really tells a why to things. But people can lie on surveys. People cannot respond on surveys. People can be the quiet one in the focus group room. And how do we extract that data? So I also use secondary data in our system. So it really depends on what industry you're in and what division. But employee experience should be a foundational piece of your work, regardless of what division you are in an organization. So if you are managing employee experience, tap into those HR systems. They have enormous value on tenure and attrition, on new hire data. It's not just a survey. And then with the data listening piece, if I may, I continue with the data listening piece. Okay. So with the data listening piece, I also add another component, which is negative space. And I do that and I add that negative space component. And you're probably going, what is that? But we can learn a lot from the art world. The art world has a lot of negative space and it's very meaningful. So it is that empty component. And I think when I was at the CX forums, I talked about a famous case study where it was in World War II and they had um, Allied bombers were going over occupied Europe and they were being shot down at a staggering rate. 50% of the Allied bombers were being lost over those runs. The commander set up a study, a project to investigate all the returning aircraft, and they analyzed every last bullet hole. They measured the depth, the size, the location. They were always in the fuselage, the wingtips, and the tail. And they decided to shore up and reinforce all of these bullet holes, which makes logical sense. Until a statistician by the name of Abraham Wald said, what is going on with the aircraft that don't return? And what is happening in the unscathed areas of the plane. And this critical observation falls under
Mm.
negative space. And in that, he made that critical observation determined what they would implement, which was shoring up the unscathed, the perfectly intact areas of the plane, where the pilot sat, where the engine and the propellers were, shoring up those areas, saving lives. So this negative space comes with all of this other investigation. So there were so there was study based on the quantitative data, all the bullet holes and all of the locations. It was qualitative. What were the pilots who had returned seeing? But then there's this also unspoken voice of the pilots who didn't return. That negative space is critical, and we want to think about that in a less severe way. Obviously, that was catastrophic, but in a less severe way, we want to bring that data listening component to our employee experience. and I will beat that drum continuously because I think it's important, the things that we don't measure, and as a discipline to grow and learn from what we don't measure and what we don't see. We can look at it if we think about the medical world over the last 200 years. It wasn't until the late 1980s that the NIH implemented a policy requesting and suggesting, recommending, excuse me, women be included in medical studies. But up until that point, so this is recent history, the 80s, the late 80s, and that was a recommendation, it wasn't a mandate. We had a voiceless component. So we were analyzing our data and we were doing our best, and we took all the information, we took the metabolic information from in the CBC and all of the medical studies, and we made determinations based on this. But we had a population that might have had a different hormonal composition and might react differently. In the late 80s, NIH said, hey, maybe this is a good idea. Negative space plays out right there pretty broadly across the world. We can see it happening. So that patient experience, for example, is going to be very different.
There's a interesting correlation with the learning and development world. That's the null curriculum. So the curriculum that you teach is your curriculum, and then you can pay attention to what's not being taught. Because, like it or not, you're teaching something by deciding what to teach and what not to teach. So if I'm avoiding a critical topic that I'm afraid to teach, I'm actually teaching that it's okay to ignore that topic.
Yes, you are.
Right? Right? And you're sending a message no matter what. And so you have to be really careful when you're building curriculum. If you omit something, you're teaching that it's okay, or you're supposed to be omitting it. And that can do damage down the line. So I think that's an interesting correlation with training in the employee engagement space, right?
I love that, Michael, because you're 100% right. When we don't train, we're implicitly sending a message that kind of doesn't matter to folks. We're kind of letting them know, like, that's not as important because we're not emphasizing it. We're not putting some dollars, resources, time, and effort into the training programs for those topics.
Exactly.
So I love this, and I love where you went with it, Michael. I want to go with it from a leadership perspective then, Chantel, right, in this negative space, because we work a lot with C-suites, and I work a lot in coaching with leaders, or as Michael calls it, I do a lot of pastoring with leaders, probably more than anything.
Love it.
And this is a concept that I think leaders need to understand, that data listening and negative space, right? So they want to see dashboards. They want dashboards. And I'm not saying, I have said it, I think dashboards are ridiculous if that's all you look at.
If that's all.
Right. And so we have a lot of C-suite leaders who want dashboards, and we want to know these metrics, and we want to know this. When I hear you talk about this, what makes me excited, and we work with the leader, people on here have heard me talk about Shawn a lot. Shawn says, as a CEO, if you aren't out walking the floor of your call centers, or the floor of or meeting with people virtually, however it is, what it looks like now, the new norm in that, you're missing a component of data. And that's what I'm hearing here, is that is so valuable.
Yeah.
How can you let's just say this, how can you run a call center effectively if you're never in your call center?
You can't.
Right? Or another friend of ours, we talked about Zach earlier, he says, how do you know what your product or service is like if you don't use your product or service? To me, that's all negative space in my head. And am I thinking about that right, Chantel? Like, is that the way to think about that?
There's voids. Exactly, Shawn. There's voids and there's inverse. So if you look at like a film, like, I know we don't develop film anymore, but it would be the negative in the film. It's the inverse of what we actually see. It's the inverse of what we measure. So we're not measuring it, but it's there and it exists. So 100%. It's all data. So walking the floors of the manufacturing plant is data. And to take that into account, and it could be the feel, that experience component. It could be the staffing, the speed, the cleanliness, in the manufacturing plant. So nothing is one data point. If I were to ask you, for example, on a scale of, you know 1 to 10, how happy are you with X, and you gave me an answer, that's one data point. That doesn't tell me the full picture. So dashboards are kind of along those lines. They give you kind of a snapshot gauge to know when what I call data blips. When data blips, I start to deep dive and do the analytics and investigations. If I see it running steady in a work world, I see it kind of running steady, then I might be okay. The minute it blips, and that's what the dashboard would be useful for, is seeing some of that. But it doesn't tell you the whys. It doesn't tell you the empty spaces. It just is it tells you the temperature. It's a thermometer, thermostat. It tells you the temperature.
So, see, you've got my mind going here. So, just like I say that we've shot our selves in the foot in the industry around experience because we classify everything as CX, right? Which
Hmm.
we don't believe in. Michael and I, Mofi, our company, we talk about it's an experience ecosystem, right?
Hmm.
I almost feel like data has been defined incorrectly, um, because we think of it as those things, surveys, blah, blah, blah. And we need to really broaden our horizons and our thoughts around what data is.
Yes.
Um, and that needs to be something we need to help people do in the industry. When that word doesn't just mean this, it means all of this.
Yes, 100%. So, for example, do I have? I'm not sure. I want to check the time with you because there are a few really strong topics where negative space is all we have.
Well,
So,
I
how
want
are we moving that?
so I want to get to that, right? So,
Right.
so in light of this additional component of negative space that we've talked about, in experience management areas,
Hmm.
and what in experience management are the greatest challenge to measure or capture due to this negative space? Because I know you're passionate about one particular area here.
So there's tons of there are tons, but so this has been playing in my mind for a long time. Is we do not do an adequate job. So psychological safety is sort of a hot topic at the moment. I hope it stays there and we develop tools to measure it. So for our audience that might not be aware of it, in the work world, what psychological safety means is that we're free to speak up without retaliation, humiliation, retribution, or negative impact to your career or job. So we want to create psychological safety in all of our work. How do we collect that? Currently, we only do it through survey work. We only are collecting it through questions. So we're asking people directly, for example, how comfortable are you speaking with your line manager? Or directly, do you feel safe to speak up? And we only collect it through surveys. But think about it critically for a moment, guys. We are asking people who potentially don't feel safe to tell us they don't feel safe. So we can toss that out. That's not going to get us any answers because I'm going to lie on the survey, right? If it were me, and thankfully for me, I have a super whole department, but I would lie or I wouldn't answer the survey. Or you also have, what is it, Campbell's law, which says that if you do direct action based off of your survey results, people will skew their answers in order to get the action they want taken out of it. So, in particularly vulnerable topics or sensitive topics, surveys are not the way to get the answers. What is? It's told to us. What is one of the number one reasons people leave their job? Bad manager. So we have all the data right there, right? People leave for bad managers. All we need to do is look at attrition. If we see higher turnover in particular divisions, we have potential red flags. doesn't, it could be a hard area of the business, but we start to have some flares going up. So looking at data and not just survey responses. What about the areas of the business where we have no responses? Say we get 80% on our, companies all over now have gotten on board with doing yearly or bi-yearly or quarterly surveys. What if we get 80% all the time, but there's one area of the part of the business we get 20%? What does that mean? So if we're going to look at the data responses, let's look at the non-responses, and let's look at other information that we know in our systems that could give us flags, because vulnerable areas are not going to answer honestly. They just won't. So I take umbrage with doing surveys to catch the sensitive data. We're not going to get honest answers. But we will in our data. It will speak to us if we're listening to it.
Michael?
Yeah, I think we're going to have you back because we're just now starting to get into, the conversation that I think everyone wants to have, which is, okay, if, and it's a big if, because not everybody wants to be listening, but if people truly do want to listen, we were talking earlier about so many CEOs don't want to invest in experience. Well, they've got a bad taste in their mouth because there have been so many dumb moves with experience and so many bad decisions with experience. And they look around and are like, I've done that. It didn't work. Well, you're not doing it right. So it sounds like you're in the same place of, you can do surveys all day long, and unless you know what you're listening for and how to really get the real answers, you're wasting your time, and then you're making decisions based on that. So you're making bad decisions, and you're going to be spiraling into the abyss. So, we'll have to put a pause on this one and start up again.
I know.
Yeah.
Put a pin in it.
Yeah. Well, Chantel, thank you so much. Yes, and we'll get you back on, either in August or September, because I do think this is not only just great to hear, but even like I said in the beginning, it's a critical learning opportunity for all of us. You're making me think of things in such a different way as we, even as we go do ethnographic research.
Good.
We hear things, but it's the things that we don't hear that it's like, why aren't it right? So
and how do we capture that? It's a developing science. How are we capturing it? But when we have these conversations and engage in these thought conversations, we can build tools that will help us measure negative spaces more appropriately.
Love it. If you'll hang out, Michael and I are going to close up the show,
my friend.
and then we'll come and say bye to you once we go from being live. So thanks, Chantel.
Thank you.
All right, Michael. Wow. I'm going to go lay by the pool and soak all that in. Not in the sun, in the shade. So those of you that know, yes. So couple last things. Hey, you want to reach out and learn more about us? mofi.co. Or you can go to my website, ShawnNason.com, if that's easy to remember, and you can get to there. Send us an email at hello@mofi.co as well. I told you about the special edition of the podcast with Zach, this coming out in July. I think July 8th or July 15th will be the first one. Connect with Michael and I and Chantel on LinkedIn. That's where you can get the most out of all of us. But most importantly, if you play in this experience ecosystem that we're talking about, as we're talking about experience with data, there's so many areas. We want you, and we would love to have you on the show. Reach out to Michael and I and let us know, and we will get you booked when we start back in August. So, Michael, I know you're traveling back home today, so have safe travels and enjoy your weekend. And to everybody else, we will see you back here in a little over a month. All right. Bye, Michael.
Have a good one.